HR professionals always find themselves at the center of most things in companies. This puts HR in rooms where there are people from multiple functions who don't necessarily share their views, and there's a lot of conflict. Are modern HR professionals really skilled enough to manage conflicts, negotiate better outcomes? Let's close the loop on this. Joining me on Close the Loop is Parul Singh. She's the VP of HR at Xceedance. Parul, welcome to Close the Loop.
Thank you, Srini. Thank you for having me today.
So why does HR find itself at the center of everything?
Why does HR find center? I mean, HR is at the center of everything. You know, organizations are about people, and HR department is about people. So whether we like it or not, we end up being at the center of things. And you know, the evolving landscape of the employment scenarios, especially from the time of COVID, and you know, COVID has really shaken everything else.
Right.
And even if we were in the bylanes, we are now like truly in the center of things. So yes, like it or not, we end up being in the center.
But is it a kind of a double-edged sword? I mean, I'm sure HR is happy that you're part of most of these things, but what is the flip side to it?
I mean, not technically a flip side, but you know, not everybody would be comfortable being at the center of things in this way, and especially at the different stages of careers of HR professions also, you know, not everybody, as I said, would be comfortable. So yes, two-sided, and it does require a certain amount of, you know, conflict management, as you said in the beginning, that to really deal with situations that come in and day out. And what I'm noticing over the last few years, or rather many, I would say a decade or so, Srini, is that at least our education system has done a good job, you know, in terms of
preparing
the grads.
HR.
Yes, the grads that are, you know, coming out of the management colleges, you know, the group discussions, the kind of courses and the preparations that they go through during their, you know, during their college days. I think that really makes them ready to a large extent to deal with corporate situations, and at least, if not head on, they are not uncomfortable dealing with things, right?
Yeah.
So they are okay to participate, and from there on you need to groom. So as long as somebody is at least coming forward and saying that, yes, we should be partnering with business, we should be partnering with people and solving these situations, is a good start.
And you know, you've been a HR professional for almost 2 decades now. So do you see this change? I think you mentioned COVID was a big forcing function. Why was COVID such a big forcing function to bring HR into the center of most things?
I'm sure, Srini, you would remember that around a decade or, you know, 15 years ago, a lot of conversations were about technology. Right? Everything new age was, and it's not that it is not today, but we have come to a stage wherein people have really realized that people are at the core of the organizations. It's not, and even if we were saying it in the past, it was not truly realized by business leaders. And that's where I think COVID acted as a catalyst and brought in the required push for business leaders to think that, you know, at the end of the day, whatever we are designing, whatever we are doing is for people and by the people, right? So in that sense, I think COVID did push things in the people side and brought in enough light onto the subject. It's not just that we need to have good amount of technology or the best of infrastructure. It's not just that. If you do not have the right people, you're not going to be succeeding.
Right.
So that has really brought in.
Absolutely right. And I think I'm glad that it's brought in that realization. So let's dive into some of the typical situations where conflict comes. I know, like we started off by saying that HR is part of so many different things, but can you name just 3 scenarios where the maximum potential for conflict arises?
I think the topmost would be deliverables, whether you call it performance or, you know, in any form when we're talking about the expectations one has around the deliverables. It could be between leaders, employees, and at multiple levels. That would be one. 2, in the way we have been operating in last 2-3 decades, you know, see the whole global thing, global, local, and all of that has brought in multiple cultures together, right? So collaboration in that kind of situation also brings in a lot of conflict. So 2, I would say that. 3, I think policies and processes. And why conflict in such situations is because the interpretation is different many a times.
You mean by the
so-
employee? Or?
Yeah, by different parties.
Right.
So somebody, any simple policy also, finance may be interpreting it in a different way. The team member might be, translating it in a different way. The leaders might be translating it in a different way. So that does bring in conflicts many times.
Right.
So top 3 would be that.
Okay, so let's dig into where do you think HR falters in each of these? Like the
Falters.
lack of the skill, right? Let's talk about deliverable. I think that's the first.
Many times people, HR professionals end up being the rule book keeper, right? So all people areas are gray. There is
Yes.
barely anything you would be able to find black
Yeah.
and white.
Right.
So being an HR professional, one needs to be very comfortable with ambiguity.
And let's talk about the second scenario, the global scenario.
Yeah, I think we have evolved. We have evolved, definitely. You know, things are not what they were 15 years ago. Things
Right.
are, the time zones, the various platforms that we have to really connect with each other,
Yeah.
sitting in different time zones have really helped. But in the sense of, still conflicts arise because of lack of communication, because of not clearly communicating as to what you mean by this. And it's an assumption that,
Right.
in a certain environment, you might assume that this is how it works, and when I'm saying this, the other party would be able to understand it. So one is assumption, incorrect assumption that what you're saying is clearly
Correct.
being understood by the other party.
I find this a lot when you're trying to create policies for hiring in, let's say, America or Europe, when
Yeah.
your existing policies may not work.
Yeah, may not work. Plus, being able to customize it
Yeah.
to the geography. At certain level, there would be an overarching principle that this is how we want to work.
Correct.
But to really make it successful in a certain geography, you need to customize it. And when you're trying to sell that idea to the other party, it's not just the business, it's your own HR teams also. That, if, for example, if we talk about the benefits, there are the benchmarks of benefits in different geographies are different.
They're
What
different,
may be okay in US may not be okay in India, and what may be okay in India may not be okay in US or in UK or in other geographies. So how do you bring it to a point wherein all other parties are able to understand that this benefit is useful and this is how we should implement it, this is why it is needed. That needs some level of consensus building.
Right.
You would be able to do that only when you're able to, really explain
Correct.
then why
Correct.
you want to do this.
Agreed. So let's switch to then, like you mentioned that nowadays HR professionals go through like these specialized programs like an XLRI and all of that, where they learn these things. But I think the real world is slightly more complex. How do you train a HR professional to manage conflict better?
Yeah, good question. So one the standard approach is, of course, we do encourage people to go through learning curriculums or the training programs specialized on such topics, which is like having difficult conversations, having conflict management and all of that.
Yeah.
So that may not fully prepare you, but it gives you ideas to really construct your conversation, at least that much. So if not, if there are people who are going through such training, so I would not be expecting that you completely come out of it fully prepared and there is a version 2 of you. That doesn't happen. But at least bring in those key points that may help you hold such conversations in future. And there is no harm in duplicating it as is.
Correct.
Sometimes you need to just practice it in a certain way, and then it becomes natural to you. Because conflict management is not a natural thing. You really need to train yourself to do that.
Why is listening such an important skill for HR?
See,
is it only for HR or for the others?
For everybody, and especially in conflict management, because you need to understand what the other party is trying to say. Right? So first, be willing to listen to what the other party has to say.
Understand their
Understand their point of view, and then try to really see that does it have to be this way or that way? Can there be a common ground that can be found in such situations? Because it's not, none of this is personal.
Correct.
That's
Obviously,
also
yes.
one has to remember that it is not personal.
Right.
We all are working for one team,
Yeah.
and if someone is coming with a certain requirement, we have to.
But do you find that sometimes we lose sight of that, and HR professionals say that, okay, this is mine,
Yeah.
and you're trying to change something that's mine.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
That also happens, and
Right.
we all are humans. So I would not say that we can discount human side
The human
of
side.
any situation. We cannot. And yes, HR teams and business teams, both sides, and in fact, all sides do have this sense of entitlement that, this is what I wanted, this is my baby, I want this to be done so right, and these are my processes. I'm not going to be bending the processes for you. So these sort of conversations do come up, and we have to just explain that.
So in conclusion, like if there's, a lot of HR members of the community watch our show. So for any HR professional out there, senior, mid-level or junior, if they want to improve their conflict management capabilities, what are a few practical things that you would ask them to do?
So to start with, definitely be a good listener.
Okay.
And it takes practice. It does take practice. What is that term? Monkey mind. Your mind is really never stable, and to be really able to listen clearly and with the intent that you want to understand, not with the intent that you want to respond. Two, getting objective about the situation, and bringing objectivity to the situation. It's not because when you're resolving a conflict, there would be 2 parties, 3 parties, or whatever. So then being very clear that what is the purpose that we are here for, and sometimes you have to be a mediator, sometimes you have to be sort of a negotiator. You have to play different roles to really resolve that conflict.
Right.
So then, in that case, my advice would be to really understand what is your personal style. Not all of us can really put on the negotiation hat.
Yes, true.
Not all of us can be a facilitator, because we end up being on one side or the other side, which is very natural, right? So choose what is your own style of resolving the conflict. I think aside to that, build your own credibility with time.
That's a great point, actually, the last one.
Because if people don't see you credible, or if you haven't earned enough credibility, then irrespective of you being the best negotiator, being facilitating the whole thing very well, being objective, people would not buy in.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Parul, for being on Close the Loop.
Thank you, Shuni.